The sky above Zaloria Prime burned like fire. Red and orange streaks from exploding warships painted the clouds. The sound of laser beams, distant roars, and the tremors of collapsing buildings filled the air. The planet, once calm and full of green valleys, now groaned under the weight of war. At the center of the battlefield stood Lyra, the young queen of the Zalorian people. Her armor, sleek and silver blue, reflected the flickering light of explosions around her. Her eyes, bright and determined, scanned the horizon. She was small for a queen, barely 20 cycles old, but her courage and wisdom had already earned her the loyalty of thousands of soldiers. Lyra's army, a mix of fierce warriors and advanced combat machines, moved as a single, disciplined force. They had fought many battles before, but today felt different. The enemy forces were stronger, larger, and more cunning than any they had faced. Reports from the scouts said the Varkari, a rival alien clan, had called in reinforcements. Lyra's heart pounded, but she refused to show fear. She raised her weapon, a glowing plasma spear that hummed with energy. "Forward!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Her soldiers roared back in unison. The battle was intense. Energy blasts scorched the ground, and alien cries echoed in the smoke. Lyra moved quickly, using both her agility and her intelligence to dodge attacks. Her soldiers fell around her, some injured, some already claimed by the chaos. But she could not stop. She could not retreat. The enemy had captured strategic positions, and the lives of her people depended on her leadership. Lyra spotted a squad of enemy warriors moving toward her left flank. Without hesitation, she sprinted forward, her spear slicing through the air. She fought with skill and precision, her movements almost like a dance, each strike measured, each dodge calculated. For a moment it seemed as if she could turn the tide of the battle. But the Varkari were clever. A hidden group emerged from the smoke and attacked from behind. Lyra's focus split and a powerful blow struck her side. Pain erupted through her body and she stumbled to the ground. Her vision blurred. She could hear the cries of her soldiers, some calling her name, some screaming in terror. Her armor, which had protected her for years, was scorched and damaged. Lyra tried to rise, but her body refused. The pain was sharp, like fire coursing through her veins. She crawled a few feet, dragging her weapon with her, hoping to reach safety. But the enemy was relentless. The Varkari warriors surrounded her. One raised a weapon, preparing to strike the final blow. Then Lyra heard it. A faint sound, almost drowned by the chaos, but enough to spark hope. Her soldiers had begun a retreat, taking the wounded with them. But they could not save her. She realized with a heavy heart that she was alone. The queen of the Zalorians, left behind in a battlefield soaked with blood and fire. She gritted her teeth and dragged herself behind a fallen war machine. Smoke and dust filled her lungs, but she forced herself to keep breathing. "I will not die here," she whispered, though every part of her body screamed that she might. She thought of her people, her family, and the future of her planet. She could not leave them behind. Not yet. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The sun disappeared behind thick clouds of smoke. Lyra's vision darkened, and she felt her strength fading. She wanted to call for help, but no one was there. The battlefield was quiet now, except for distant explosions and the groans of injured soldiers. Her mind wandered to memories of her childhood. She remembered learning to fight from her mother, the former queen, who had taught her that courage and wisdom were stronger than any weapon. She remembered the first time she had led a small squad into battle, and how proud she had felt when they succeeded. And now, lying on this alien world, wounded and alone, she remembered that courage was not about winning every fight. It was about standing up even when the world was against you. Lyra tried to stand again. Her legs trembled and pain shot through her side, but she pushed herself forward. She crawled over rocks, fallen soldiers, and burning debris. Each movement was agony, but she refused to stop. She could see the horizon in the distance, a small valley that might offer shelter. If she could just reach it, maybe she could survive until someone found her. As she moved, she heard strange sounds. At first, she thought they were the enemy, but they were softer, closer. Footsteps. Not the heavy, purposeful steps of soldiers, but lighter, careful movements. Her heart quickened. Could it be reinforcements? Could it be someone coming to save her? She wanted to call out, but her voice was weak, her energy drained with every attempt to speak. Then a shadow appeared in the distance, a figure moving carefully through the smoke. Lyra squinted, trying to see clearly. The figure was human. She had seen humans before in distant reports, explorers from another system, but never up close. They were small, fragile-looking, and yet, the figure moved with purpose, carrying strange tools she had never seen. The human approached cautiously, as if wary of her. Lyra's mind raced. Was this an enemy? Or could this stranger help her? She tried to speak, but only a weak croak came out. The human dropped to his knees beside her, speaking softly in a language she did not understand. But his tone was calm, kind, and patient. He examined her wounds carefully, using strange devices that glowed with light. Lyra felt warmth spread through her side, and the pain, though still sharp, became more bearable. She closed her eyes for a moment, exhausted. The human worked quickly, moving with skill and precision as if he knew exactly what to do. When she opened her eyes again, she saw the human looking at her with determination. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a strong desire to help. Lyra felt a strange sensation, one she had never felt before. Hope. For the first time since the battle began, she believed she might survive. Hours passed as the human worked. He built a small shelter using materials he carried, shielding her from the wind and rain. He fed her small amounts of water and food, careful not to overwhelm her body. Lyra, though weak, watched him with growing admiration. She had never seen anyone so dedicated to saving another life, especially someone so different from her own. People. Finally, as night fell and the stars appeared above, Lyra spoke in a hoarse whisper. Why do you help me?" The human looked at her, his expression gentle. He spoke slowly, using simple words, pointing to her wounds, and then to himself. "Life must be saved. Always. Help." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling a tear roll down her cheek. She did not know this human's name, nor did she know if she could ever repay him. But in that moment she realized that courage and kindness could come in many forms, not just from warriors on the battlefield, but from those who chose to save lives when no one else would. The night passed slowly. Lyra drifted in and out of consciousness, her body healing slowly under the human's care. She felt a strange mix of pain and relief. She had survived the battle, against all odds, thanks to someone she could not have imagined. A human from a distant world who saw her, not as an enemy or a queen, but simply as a life to protect. As the first light of dawn broke over the valley, Lyra opened her eyes fully. She was weak, but alive. And for the first time in days, she felt a spark of hope. Somewhere beyond the horizon, her people were still fighting. Somewhere her throne waited for her return, and somewhere, this human, this strange, brave human stood beside her, ready to face whatever came next. Lyra knew one thing for certain. The battle was far from over, but she would not face it alone. And perhaps with this human by her side, she could learn something new about courage, about life, and about the strength of beings very different from her own. Her journey had begun, not just to survive, but to rise again. The valley was quiet now. The smoke and chaos of the battlefield were far behind, replaced by the soft rustling of alien plants and the distant call of unfamiliar creatures. Sunlight filtered through the clouds, casting a gentle glow on the jagged rocks and small streams of water. For the first time since the battle, Lyra felt a moment of peace, though her body still throbbed with pain. The human, Captain Ethan Hayes, moved carefully around her, checking her injuries again. His hands were steady, his face calm, and his eyes thoughtful. He had placed her on a small bed of soft alien leaves, and a makeshift canopy protected her from the sun. Despite the alien world around him, Ethan acted with confidence as if nothing could surprise him. Lyra, however, could not relax. She was still weak, her body fragile after the battle, but her mind remained alert, observing this strange human. Lyra tried to sit up. A sharp pain ran through her side and she groaned softly. Ethan placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Easy," he said, his voice calm, soothing. He gestured with his hands, showing her that she should rest. Lyra frowned, frustrated. She hated feeling weak, hated needing help, but she could not deny that without Ethan she might have already died on the battlefield. After a few minutes, Lyra managed to raise her head. Her eyes met Ethan's, and she studied him carefully. He was smaller than she had imagined, with fair skin, brown hair, and eyes that seemed unusually calm for someone in such a dangerous place. He wore a simple suit marked with scratches and dirt, but it did not seem like armor. Yet somehow, he had saved her life. That fact alone demanded respect. Lyra spoke slowly, her voice hoarse. "Why, help me?" she asked, her alien accent, soft but noticeable. The words were weak, but they carried the weight of curiosity and caution. Ethan smiled faintly. He moved closer and spoke slowly, using simple words, pointing to her wounds and then to himself. "Life. Save. Always. Help," he said. Lyra blinked. She did not understand the human language completely, but his tone and gestures made the meaning clear. He had no reason to help her. He did not belong to her world, yet he chose to save her life. That choice was remarkable. Lyra's curiosity grew stronger than her exhaustion. She tried to speak again, asking questions in her own tongue. Ethan shook his head slightly, motioning that he could not understand. A small frown formed on Lyra's face, but she quickly realized something important. Words were not always needed to communicate. Actions, expressions, and gestures could speak just as loudly. And in this moment, Ethan's actions spoke volumes about courage, kindness, and determination. Days passed slowly in the valley. Ethan tended to Lyra's wounds with care. He used strange devices to clean her injuries, applied salves that glowed softly, and carefully monitored her condition. Each day she felt a little stronger. The pain remained, but it became manageable and she could sit up longer. She began to trust the human more, though she still did not understand him fully. During these quiet hours, Lyra observed Ethan closely. He was resourceful. He had built a shelter, collected water, and even set small traps to catch alien animals for food. His knowledge of survival was impressive, and his determination was unwavering. Lyra had led armies, commanded fleets, and strategized battles, but she had never seen a being so small yet so capable of adapting to an alien world. She felt a strange admiration for him. One morning, Lyra finally managed to speak more clearly. She pointed to herself and then to him, repeating slowly, "Lyra, Queen, you, human?" Ethan nodded, pointing to himself. "Ethan," he said. He then pointed to her and nodded. Lyra understood. Even though they spoke different languages, names were simple bridges between worlds. The days continued with careful routines. Ethan brought her water, helped her exercise to regain strength, and kept watch for dangerous creatures. Lyra, despite her pride, learned to accept help. Each small act of kindness built trust, and each gesture from Ethan reminded her that humans could be brave and compassionate in ways her people often underestimated. One afternoon, as Lyra sat near a stream to drink water, she noticed the scars of the battlefield in the distance. Smoke still rose from fires left behind by her enemy, the Varkari. A sense of urgency returned to her heart. Her people were still fighting. Some might have survived, but others were lost. Lyra knew she could not remain in the valley forever. She had to reclaim her throne, to lead her people, and to end the conflict. Ethan noticed the change in her expression. He did not speak, but he understood. Humans were good at understanding nonverbal cues. He brought a small map-like device, pointing toward the enemy territory. Lyra nodded. She did not need words to understand his meaning. He was ready to help her fight if necessary. As she regained strength, Lyra began to explore the valley cautiously. She discovered small plants with edible leaves, streams with fresh water, and even strange creatures that watched her curiously from a distance. Ethan taught her how to use some human tools to aid her survival. Though the tools were simple, they were clever. Lyra could see that humans use their minds as much as their bodies, a trait she respected greatly. One evening, Lyra spoke in her native tongue, though softly, to herself. "I thought I was alone, but this human, he is different." Ethan overheard but did not interrupt. He continued preparing food, working silently. Lyra watched him and realized something important. Humans had a courage that was quiet but unshakable. They did not always fight with strength or weapons. They fought with intelligence, with empathy, and with determination. Lyra's body healed slowly, but her mind sharpened as well. She began to strategize, thinking about how to reclaim her throne. She knew her soldiers were scattered, some hiding, some captured, and some still fighting small battles on their own. The enemy believed she was dead, which could be an advantage. But she also knew the risks. She would be weak for a while, and the Varkari were ruthless. Ethan noticed her thoughtful expression and in his own human way tried to offer support. He pointed to her side, then to himself, and made a motion as if saying, "Recover first, then fight." Lyra understood immediately. Humans had a strange way of thinking ahead, planning carefully before action. She admired it. The first night Lyra slept fully in the valley, she dreamed. She dreamed of her kingdom, of her people cheering for her return. She dreamed of battles won, strategies executed perfectly, and allies joining her cause. But she also dreamed of the human who had saved her, small and fragile by her side, yet brave and steadfast. When she awoke, she realized that she was no longer just a queen. She was a survivor, and someone had helped her survive. Over the next few days, Lyra tested her strength. She walked further each day, ran short distances, and even practiced small combat movements with Ethan's guidance. He taught her to use human tools creatively, and she began to combine her alien combat skills with his methods. She could see that together, they could accomplish something greater than either alone. One afternoon, Lyra finally asked a question she had been curious about. She pointed to Ethan and to the sky, then made a motion as if asking, "Where? From?" Ethan smiled and pointed upward, then touched his chest. "Earth," he said. Lyra repeated it softly, testing the sound. "Earth." A small smile appeared on her face. A human from another planet who had come so far had chosen to save her life. She felt a new kind of respect for him, one that went beyond gratitude. The days turned into a week. Lyra's strength returned steadily, and she realized it was time to move. The valley had been safe, but the world outside was still dangerous. She needed to return to her people, to lead, and to fight for her kingdom. But she also needed Ethan. She could not imagine facing the challenges ahead alone. Humans had shown her that courage came in many forms, not just in strength, but in intelligence, kindness, and determination. Finally, the day came when Lyra stood fully upright. Her body was not yet at full strength, but it was enough. She looked at Ethan, her eyes filled with gratitude and determination. She gestured toward the distant horizon, where the smoke of the battlefield still lingered. He nodded, understanding perfectly. Together, they would face the challenges ahead. Lyra realized something powerful that day. Survival was only the first step. To protect her people, reclaim her throne, and change the future, she would need courage, intelligence, and allies she could trust. And for the first time, she truly understood that humans, small, fragile, but determined, could be among the greatest allies a queen could hope for. Her journey to rise again had begun, but this time she would not walk alone. The valley was quiet, but the distant smoke from the battlefield reminded Lyra that the war had not ended. Each day she felt stronger, but she also felt the weight of responsibility. Her people were scattered, and her throne had not yet been reclaimed. She could not ignore what waited for her beyond the valley. Ethan stood nearby, sharpening a simple blade he had crafted from alien metal. Lyra watched him with curiosity. He seemed ordinary, yet his mind worked in ways she could not have imagined. Even in a place full of danger, he remained calm, planning and always ready to act. His courage was quiet, but undeniable. Lyra realized that survival depended not only on strength but also on intelligence, creativity, and patience, qualities humans seemed to possess naturally. She attempted to walk further than before, testing her legs. The pain in her side still lingered, but it no longer controlled her. She moved slowly, each step deliberate, while Ethan supported her when necessary. "We need to be ready," he said softly, pointing to the distant horizon where dark shapes moved among the rocks. Enemies, and could still be near. Lyra nodded. Humans were cautious. It was a lesson she needed to remember. Not every battle required immediate action. Sometimes patience and preparation were more important than courage alone. Over the next few days, Lyra began learning more about Ethan. Through gestures and simple drawings, they shared stories. Ethan had come from Earth, a distant planet, to explore and study worlds like Soloria Prime. He was not a soldier, but his knowledge of survival, strategy, and engineering was impressive. Lyra found herself admiring the human's resilience. He was small compared to her, yet he moved with purpose, adapted quickly to challenges, and never gave up. Lyra shared her own story with him in her language, using gestures and sketches. She spoke of her people, her throne, and the recent war. Ethan listened attentively, asking questions through gestures and simple words. He did not judge, did not interrupt, and never questioned her authority. Lyra began to feel trust growing, stronger than she had ever felt for anyone outside her species. This human had saved her life, but more importantly, he had respected her as a leader, not just as a wounded alien. One morning, Lyra and Ethan decided to explore the valley together. Lyra walked steadily, carrying her plasma spear, while Ethan followed with his tools. They examined plants and small creatures, Ethan teaching her about methods humans use to gather food and water safely. Lyra learned quickly, combining her alien instincts with his simple, clever ideas. For the first time, she realized that humans could be powerful allies, not through raw strength but through creativity and determination. As they moved, they discovered tracks in the soft ground, signs that other beings had passed recently. Lyra's instincts told her to be cautious. The Varkari, their enemies, could be nearby. Ethan noticed her attention, then pointed to the tracks, making a motion as if to say, "We can avoid danger if we plan." Lyra nodded. Together, they followed a careful path, avoiding potential threats while staying close to water and shelter. During their journey, Lyra began to speak more to Ethan, using gestures and repeated words. "Fight, win," she said, pointing toward her distant kingdom. Ethan nodded, understanding immediately. He pointed to her side, then to himself, then made a motion that meant, recover first, then fight. Plan carefully. Lyra realized humans thought ahead in ways her people often ignored. They valued strategy, intelligence, and patience, qualities that could turn even a small group into a powerful force. Days passed, and Lyra's strength improved. She practiced short bursts of combat, moving with her spear, while Ethan observed. He suggested small changes in her technique, ways to conserve energy, maintain balance, and use the environment to her advantage. At first, Lyra resisted. She had led armies and won battles through her skill alone. But she quickly saw that Ethan's advice worked. Combining her natural abilities with human cleverness made her faster, stronger, and smarter. One evening, as they rested near a small stream, Lyra watched the sunset paint the sky in orange and pink. She spoke softly in her language, though Ethan could not understand every word. "I thought I knew courage. But humans, you are different." Ethan smiled, shrugging. He pointed to her, then himself, then made a gesture as if to say, "Different, yes. But together, stronger." Lyra nodded slowly. She began to understand that alliances could be powerful, even between beings from completely different worlds. The bond between them deepened. Lyra began sharing more than just stories of war. She showed Ethan her culture, the rituals, the symbols, the ways her people honored bravery and wisdom. Ethan responded with simple stories from his own world, describing Earth, human life, and the ways humans worked together. Lyra was fascinated. Humans were fragile in appearance, yet resilient, clever, and adaptable. She felt a growing admiration that went beyond gratitude. This human could be a trusted partner in the battles ahead. One day, Lyra spotted distant lights in the valley, fires that could belong to survivors of her army. Her heart raced. Perhaps her soldiers had survived. Perhaps they had begun to regroup. She turned to Ethan, pointing toward the lights and gesturing urgently. Ethan understood immediately. They packed supplies, gathering water, food, and tools for a long journey. Lyra felt determination building inside her. She had survived the battlefield, healed, and learned from the human who had saved her. Now she would reconnect with her people and plan the counterattack. The journey to the scattered survivors was not easy. Alien predators lurked in the shadows. Strange plants threatened to entangle them, and sudden storms forced them to seek shelter. Yet with Ethan's guidance, they overcame each obstacle. He had a way of observing the world, predicting danger, and adapting quickly. Lyra began to realize that human intelligence and courage were not always visible in battle. They were subtle, quiet, and incredibly effective. When they finally reached the survivors, Lyra's presence inspired hope. Many had assumed she was dead, but here she was, standing strong with a human beside her. She spoke words of encouragement, gestures of leadership, and shared plans to regroup. Her soldiers, initially wary of the human, soon recognized his value. He had helped their queen survive when all hope seemed lost. Now he could help lead them to victory. Lyra's mind raced with strategy. She considered the terrain, the strength of her enemies, and the resources at her disposal. But she also considered Ethan's advice. Humans were clever at finding unexpected solutions, using the environment, and thinking ahead. She began combining her alien tactics with his ideas, imagining ways they could reclaim their land without unnecessary risk. Over the next few days, Lyra trained with her soldiers. She practiced combat drills, shared strategies, and coordinated with Ethan to implement new plans. The human adapted quickly to alien technology, learning to operate devices and weapons. Lyra watched in awe. He was small, fragile in appearance, yet brilliant in action. She realized that survival and victory did not always depend on strength alone. Intelligence, courage, and determination could be far more powerful. One evening, Lyra and Ethan stood on a cliff overlooking the battlefield. Smoke rose in the distance, but the valley below was calm. Lyra spoke softly, almost to herself. "I will win. With him." Ethan looked at her and nodded. He did not need words. The bond they had built over days of survival, trust, and shared challenges spoke louder than any language. The young queen realized something profound. Trust and cooperation were not weaknesses. Accepting help, learning from others, and working together made her stronger than she had ever been. Humans were different, yes, but their courage, determination, and creativity could turn even the impossible into reality. And with Ethan by her side, she believed they could reclaim her throne and protect her people. The sun set, painting the valley in gold and purple. Lyra felt renewed determination. The journey ahead would be difficult. The enemy was strong, her kingdom partially lost, and the battles ahead dangerous. But she was no longer alone. A human had saved her life, taught her, and become a trusted ally. Together they would face the challenges ahead, combining alien strength and human ingenuity to restore peace and protect the future. Lyra knew the hardest part of her journey was yet to come. But now she had hope, courage, and a partner who shared her vision. She would rise again, not just as a queen, but as a leader who understood that true strength came from unity, trust, and determination across worlds. And so, with the stars beginning to shine above, Lyra and Ethan prepared for the next phase of their journey. Together they would face the dangers, the enemies, and the unknowns of a war-torn world. Together, they would fight not just to survive, but to reclaim what was lost and prove that courage, intelligence, and unity could overcome any obstacle. The bond between alien queen and human savior had grown strong, and with that bond, the first steps toward reclaiming the kingdom began. The valley had grown quiet once more, but Lyra's mind was restless. She had survived the battlefield, regained her strength, and reunited with the scattered survivors of her army. Yet, the war was far from over. The Varkari still controlled much of her kingdom, their warships patrolling the skies and their soldiers occupying key cities. Lyra knew she could not wait any longer. Her people needed her leadership, and now she had a human ally who had proven his courage, intelligence, and loyalty. Together, they could turn the tide of war. Ethan stood beside her, examining a map etched onto a flat rock. His fingers traced routes and patterns, pointing to areas of enemy occupation and weak defenses. Lyra watched him carefully, impressed by the precision and logic of his planning. Humans were clever strategists, she realized. They did not rely solely on strength or fear. They studied, predicted, and adapted. And that made them powerful in ways her people often underestimated. Here, Ethan said, pointing to a narrow mountain pass, enemy patrols, small numbers. If we move carefully, we can take them by surprise. Lyra nodded, understanding immediately. She could see the advantage. The pass was narrow and rocky, perfect for an ambush. Her soldiers could hide, strike, and retreat before the enemy had a chance to regroup. The plan was clever, but it required precision, courage, and coordination. Lyra smiled faintly. Humans were not just brave, they were disciplined thinkers. Over the next few days, Lyra trained her soldiers in secret. She combined her alien combat skills with Ethan's ideas, teaching them new strategies for ambushes, stealth, and surprise attacks. She emphasized teamwork and discipline, explaining that even the bravest warrior could fail without planning and support. The soldiers began to see the value of combining alien strength with human ingenuity. Lyra and Ethan also worked on improving their equipment. Ethan modified alien weapons, making them lighter, easier to use, and more efficient. He reinforced armor, repaired damaged vehicles, and introduced simple but clever tools that could give them an edge in battle. Lyra watched in awe. Humans were small, seemingly fragile, yet their creativity and intelligence allowed them to accomplish incredible feats. She began to understand why Ethan had survived where so many others would have fallen. Finally, the day of the counterattack arrived. The sun rose over the jagged mountains, casting long shadows across the valley. Lyra stood at the front of her army, her spear glowing in the early light. Her soldiers looked to her for courage, and she gave it freely. Beside her, Ethan moved quietly, checking weapons, giving last-minute advice, and ensuring everyone understood the plan. Together, they were a team unlike any other, a human and an alien queen, leading a small but determined force against a larger enemy. The march toward the first target was tense. The narrow mountain pass loomed ahead, jagged rocks and cliffs, making the path dangerous. Enemy patrols moved along the ridge, unaware that Lyra's forces were hiding nearby. Lyra signaled with a subtle gesture, and her soldiers held their positions. Ethan pointed to a small ledge, indicating where he would position explosives to create a diversion. Lyra nodded. The plan was risky, but it relied on intelligence, timing, and courage, all qualities they both shared. The attack began silently. Ethan triggered the diversion, causing rocks to tumble down the pass and startling the enemy patrols. Lyra's soldiers moved quickly, striking from hidden positions. The enemy was caught off guard, their formation broken before they could react. Lyra herself led the charge, her spear cutting through the chaos with precision. Her soldiers fought with renewed determination, inspired by her bravery and by the clever human strategies that had guided them. The first battle was short but decisive. Lyra's forces captured the patrols, securing the pass and opening a safe route to the enemy-held territory. She stood at the top of the ridge, looking down at the captured enemies. Her chest heaved, her body tired but her spirit soaring. She turned to Ethan, who gave a small nod of approval. Humans, she realized, measured success not only by strength but by effectiveness and foresight. As they continued their march, Lyra encountered more resistance. The Varkari were clever, using the terrain to their advantage and setting traps along the way. But Lyra had learned from Ethan. She moved carefully, scanning the ground and the sky, predicting enemy movements and countering them with intelligence and strategy. Together, they turned each challenge into an opportunity. During one particularly tense encounter, a group of Varkari warriors attempted to flank her army from a hidden ravine. Lyra signaled her soldiers and they quickly formed a defensive line. Ethan climbed a small ridge, using a device to distract the enemy with light and sound. The Varkari hesitated, giving Lyra's forces the advantage. In a swift and coordinated attack, they neutralized the threat. Lyra's soldiers cheered, amazed at the clever tactics. Once again, she realized the human mind could match and even enhance alien strength. As they advanced, Lyra's thoughts turned to her people. The scattered survivors had joined them along the way, swelling their numbers and adding their own courage and skill to the fight. Lyra encouraged them, sharing strategies and leading by example. Her soldiers learned quickly, combining their natural abilities with the new human-inspired tactics. The bond between alien and human grew stronger, and even the smallest victories built confidence and hope. By nightfall, Lyra's forces reached the outskirts of a Varkari-controlled village. The enemy had fortified the area, but Lyra was not afraid. She had survived worse, and now she had a plan. She gathered her leaders, both human and alien, and outlined the strategy. It relied on stealth, clever distractions, and coordinated attacks. She emphasized timing and communication, knowing that even the strongest warriors could fail without coordination. The attack began under the cover of darkness. Lyra led the first strike, her spear glowing and cutting through the confusion. Ethan moved silently alongside her, coordinating the human-inspired tools and diversions that disoriented the enemy. Lyra's soldiers followed, striking precisely where the enemy was weakest. The battle was intense but controlled, each move deliberate and calculated. By dawn, the village was secured. Lyra's forces had won again, capturing the enemy outposts and rescuing prisoners who had been held by the Varkari. The soldiers cheered, inspired by their queen and by the clever human strategies that had guided them. Lyra looked at Ethan, gratitude and respect shining in her eyes. He had not only saved her life but had become an indispensable ally, teaching her new ways to fight and lead. As they rested, Lyra reflected on the battle. She had always believed that courage and strength were the most important qualities in a warrior. But now she realized that intelligence, creativity, and trust could be just as powerful. Humans were not the strongest physically, but their minds could shape battles, inspire others, and turn impossible situations into victories. Lyra knew that the road ahead would be difficult. The Varkari still controlled much of her kingdom, and larger battles awaited. But she also knew something else. With Ethan by her side, she had a partner who could think, adapt, and fight in ways she had never imagined. Together, they were stronger than any enemy. That night, as the stars appeared over the valley, Lyra and Ethan planned the next stage of their counterattack. They studied maps, discussed strategies, and anticipated enemy movements. Lyra felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had survived, regained her strength, and learned from a human ally whose courage and intelligence matched her own. Her soldiers slept nearby, exhausted but safe. Lyra stood on a small hill, looking out over the land she had fought so hard to reclaim. She thought of her people, of the battles yet to come, and of the human who had saved her life and now fought beside her. She realized that victory would not come from strength alone. It would come from unity, trust, and the clever use of every resource at her disposal. Lyra's journey was far from over. The war still raged, her kingdom was not yet fully reclaimed, and her enemies were still dangerous. But she was no longer alone. She had learned the value of intelligence, patience, and cooperation. She had discovered the courage of humans, their ingenuity, and their loyalty. And she had gained a trusted ally, someone who had proven that even the smallest and seemingly weakest beings could change the course of history. As dawn broke over the mountains, Lyra felt a surge of determination. The counterattack had begun, and she would not stop until her kingdom was free. With Ethan by her side, she knew they could overcome any obstacle. She was a queen, a warrior, and now, a leader who understood that true strength came not only from courage and skill but also from trust, unity, and the brilliance of the human mind. The stars faded, and the first light of the new day illuminated the valley. Lyra stood tall, spear in hand, ready to lead her army toward the battles ahead. Her journey was far from over, but with determination, intelligence, and an unlikely human ally, she believed that victory, and the hope of a better future, was within reach. The air was tense. The battlefield stretched far ahead, a scarred landscape of broken machines, smoke, and dust. The Varkari had gathered their strongest forces, confident that the young queen was gone forever. But Lyra stood at the front of her army, tall and resolute, her glowing spear in hand. Beside her, Ethan adjusted a human device that would create diversions during the fight. Together, they represented a force unlike any the Varkari had faced: courage, strategy, and unity between alien and human. Lyra's soldiers moved silently, waiting for her command. Many of them had once doubted the possibility of victory, but now, inspired by her resilience and the clever strategies she had learned from Ethan, they believed. The queen who had survived alone on a battlefield now led them to reclaim their kingdom. Her eyes scanned the horizon, noting the enemy positions. The Varkari had fortifications, but Lyra's mind was sharp. She had learned to combine her people's natural strength with human ingenuity, and this time she would use it to full effect. "Wait for my signal," she whispered to her closest commanders. Ethan nodded beside her, pointing to the devices he had set along the ridges. Small lights and subtle sounds would confuse the enemy, allowing the Zalorians to strike from multiple directions. The plan required precision, timing, and absolute trust. Lyra trusted her soldiers completely, and they trusted her. And now they also trusted the human who had saved their queen and taught them new ways to fight. The sun rose higher, and with it, the time to act arrived. Lyra raised her spear, signaling the attack. Explosions and flashes erupted along the ridges as Ethan triggered the diversions. Rocks tumbled, fires flared, and lights distracted the Varkari soldiers. Chaos spread through their ranks, and the Zalorians moved swiftly, striking with precision. Lyra led the front, her movements fast and calculated. She guided her soldiers through the chaos, combining alien combat skills with the clever tactics she had learned from Ethan. Enemy soldiers fell back, confused and disoriented, unable to counter the unexpected strategies. Lyra felt a surge of pride. Her army was not just strong, it was smart, coordinated, and courageous. Ethan moved beside her, adjusting devices, coordinating distractions, and helping the soldiers navigate difficult terrain. Lyra glanced at him and smiled faintly. Humans were smaller and seemingly fragile, yet Ethan's intelligence and bravery had become vital to their success. He was not just an ally, he was a partner, equal in strategy and determination. The battle intensified as the Varkari tried to regroup. They sent reinforcements, hoping to overwhelm Lyra's army with sheer numbers. But Lyra had anticipated this. She directed her soldiers to key positions, using high ground, natural cover, and narrow paths to their advantage. Each move was calculated, each strike timed perfectly. The human ingenuity that Ethan had taught her amplified the strength of her people. At one critical moment, a group of Varkari warriors attempted to flank the Zalorians from a hidden valley. Lyra noticed the movement immediately. She signaled to Ethan, who quickly set up a clever distraction using his devices. Rocks and light flashes caused confusion, forcing the enemy to pause. Lyra's soldiers then struck from above, neutralizing the threat efficiently. The enemy's morale began to crumble. As the battle raged on, Lyra's leadership shone. She moved among her soldiers, encouraging them, guiding them, and inspiring them to fight with courage and intelligence. Her presence reminded them why they followed her, not just because she was their queen, but because she had survived, adapted, and learned new ways to fight. The bond between queen and army, strengthened by trust and shared struggle, made them unstoppable. Hours passed, but the tide had clearly turned. The Varkari, once confident, were now retreating in disorder. Lyra's forces pushed forward, reclaiming territory, freeing captured soldiers, and dismantling enemy fortifications. Each victory, no matter how small, brought renewed hope and determination. Lyra's heart swelled with pride and relief. Her people were alive, her army strong, and her kingdom slowly being restored. Finally, the Varkari leader appeared on a hill, his forces gathering for one last attempt to hold their ground. Lyra raised her spear, and her soldiers readied themselves. She turned to Ethan, who gave a small nod. Together they would lead the final charge. With careful coordination, timing, and courage, they moved forward. Ethan triggered diversions while Lyra directed her army with precision. The enemy forces faltered, unable to respond to the unexpected strategies and coordinated attacks. Lyra herself fought with unmatched skill, her spear cutting through the chaos. She inspired her soldiers, showing that bravery, intelligence, and unity could overcome even the strongest foes. The Varkari leader realized his forces were defeated and attempted to retreat, but Lyra anticipated the move. She directed a small squad to cut off their escape, ensuring the victory would be complete. By the time the sun reached its peak, the battlefield was silent except for the cheers of the victorious Zalorians. Their queen had returned, not only surviving the war but reclaiming her kingdom through courage, intelligence, and cooperation. The Varkari were defeated, their forces scattered, and the remaining soldiers surrendered. Lyra stood at the center of the reclaimed territory, her spear raised high. Her people gathered around her, eyes shining with gratitude and admiration. Many had feared she was gone forever, but here she was, stronger, wiser, and victorious. She had survived against all odds, learned from a human ally, and led her people to triumph. Ethan stood beside her, his presence a quiet but powerful reminder of the strength of courage, intelligence, and unity. The Zalorians, initially skeptical of humans, now respected him deeply. He had not only saved their queen, but had also contributed to the victory with his clever strategies and unwavering determination. Lyra turned to him and spoke softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "You helped me. Helped us all." Ethan nodded humbly, shrugging. "We worked together," he said simply. The victory celebrations began. Lyra's people repaired buildings, freed captives, and tended to the wounded. Stories of bravery, cleverness, and unity spread quickly. Lyra and Ethan walked among their people, offering encouragement, listening to their concerns, and sharing hope for the future. The queen had returned, stronger than ever, and her kingdom had survived. That night, Lyra reflected on everything she had learned. Courage alone was not enough to survive or win battles. Intelligence, patience, adaptability, and trust were equally important. Humans, though smaller and seemingly fragile, possessed these qualities in abundance. Ethan had shown her that even the weakest-seeming beings could be powerful allies if they were brave, clever, and determined. Lyra's soldiers gathered around a small fire, celebrating quietly. They shared stories of the battle, of the human who had saved their queen, and of the clever strategies that had led to victory. Laughter and cheer filled the air, and for the first time in cycles, the Zalorians felt hope for a peaceful future. Next morning, Lyra addressed her people formally. She spoke of unity, courage, and the lessons learned from a human ally. She honored her soldiers, praising their bravery and determination, and she honored Ethan, acknowledging his role in saving her life and contributing to the victory. The Zolorians, who had once doubted the value of humans, now recognized their intelligence, courage, and worth as allies. Lyra and Ethan also discussed the future. The kingdom needed rebuilding, and the bonds between different worlds could ensure lasting peace. Ethan offered to help, sharing knowledge from Earth that could aid in technology, medicine, and strategy. Lyra realized that cooperation between species could strengthen her kingdom far beyond what strength alone could achieve. Days later, as peace settled over the land, Lyra stood on a cliff overlooking her kingdom. The sun shone brightly, reflecting off the repaired buildings and the green valleys below. She felt pride, relief, and determination. She had survived, learned, and led her people to victory. She had discovered the courage and intelligence of humans, forming a bond that would endure. Ethan joined her, carrying simple tools and notes for rebuilding. Lyra smiled, realizing that the journey was not over, but the hard part had passed. Together they could guide their people toward a stronger, safer future. She had learned that strength came in many forms: courage, skill, intelligence, and trust. And she had seen that humans, small and fragile as they might seem, could embody all of these qualities. The young queen turned to her human ally and nodded. "Together," she said softly. Ethan smiled, giving a small thumbs up. Together they would rebuild, protect, and strengthen the kingdom. Together they would face whatever challenges came next, united by trust, courage, and a shared vision for a better future. As the stars appeared that night, shining over the peaceful land, Lyra reflected on her journey. She had been wounded, left to die, and faced impossible odds. But she had survived, learned, and led her people to triumph. She had discovered the power of unity across worlds, the courage of humans, and the strength of trust. Her journey had begun with survival, but it ended with hope, respect, and victory. Lyra, the young alien queen, had risen again, and with Ethan by her side, she knew that the future of her kingdom and the bond between her people and humans would be stronger than ever. The war was over, but the lessons remained. Courage, intelligence, and unity could overcome even the